The ballroom went silent the moment Jordan's voice cracked through the microphone. "Stop pretending, Dad." Crystal glasses froze midair. Soft high-life music from the band in the corner stumbled to a halt. The giant LED screen behind the stage still flashed the event's theme in gold: "Protecting Our Future, a gala for African children's mental health." But all eyes had left the banner. They were on the tall 17-year-old boy standing beside his father. Anthony Cole, the Lagos-based billionaire everyone admired, stood frozen in an expensive navy tuxedo, hands still outstretched toward his son. Moments earlier, he'd called Jordan up for what was supposed to be a proud father-son moment, a perfect photo for the blogs. Now his son was shaking. Jordan's brown hands gripped the microphone so tight his knuckles had gone pale. His fitted black suit suddenly looked too big on his trembling shoulders. His eyes, deep and tired for someone so young, swept across the hall: politicians, pastors, celebrities, news cameras, family friends from Atlanta and Abuja. Then his gaze landed on one corner of the room. Near a pillar, dressed in a simple brown lace gown, stood a slim, beautiful woman in her late 20s. Light brown skin, straightened hair packed back in a neat bun. She had once worn Maid uniforms and carried trays in this family's mansion. Tonight, she blended in like a quiet guest. Her name was Maya. The color drained from her face when Jordan looked at her. "Tell them, Dad," Jordan said, his voice shaking but loud, echoing through the massive hall. "Tell them what really happened in your house. Tell them what you allowed to happen to your little boy." People
She is the
shifted
one
uneasily in their
responsible.
seats.
Don't let her
Camera
deny
lights
it.
blinked. Somewhere at the front table, his mother, Amara, slowly rose to her feet, her dark eyes wide and wet. "Jordan's son," Anthony began, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "this is not the right time. We can talk when we get home." Jordan laughed, a wild, broken sound that didn't fit this polished room. "Home," he repeated. "You mean that prison with marble floors? That house where I was left alone with her?" He pointed directly at Maya, and several heads turned at once, "while you both chased money and meetings." Gasps rippled through the audience. Maya instinctively stepped back, her heels scraping the polished floor. Her eyes darted to the exits, then to Anthony, silently begging for him to do something, anything. Anthony's jaw tightened. "Security," he murmured, but the nearest guards hesitated. Nobody wanted to be the first to touch the billionaire's only son in front of the press. Jordan's voice grew rougher. "You stand here talking about protecting children, raising money for mental health, but you didn't even see your own child disappearing in front of you." "Jordan, please," Amara whispered from below the stage, tears threatening to spill. "Baby, come down. Let's talk inside, please." Jordan's chest rose and fell. He swallowed, eyes burning. "She used to undress in front of me," he said, each word slow and heavy. "Every time you left, every time you were too busy. I was just a little boy, and I didn't even have the words for what was happening to me." The hall went deathly quiet. "And you know the worst part," he added, his voice dropping, the microphone barely catching it. "I told someone, and they told me to keep quiet." A murmur swept through the crowd like a sudden wind. Someone at the back started recording with their phone. A popular blogger whispered, "This is going online tonight," to her colleague. Anthony's hand shook at his side. "Jordan, who did you tell?" he asked, but his voice was weak. Jordan's eyes, filled with years of bottled hurt, locked on his father's. The next words were like a stone thrown through glass. "I told you, Dad," he said. And the hall shattered into shocked whispers. Before anyone could move, Jordan dropped the microphone. The feedback screeched, making people flinch. He stepped back from the podium, his face twisting with pain, not just at Maya, not just at the memories, but at the man who stood only a few feet away yet had never really seen him. The cameras zoomed in, on Anthony's shaking lips, on Amara's tears, on Maya's tightened jaw, on Jordan's broken expression. But to understand how this moment was born, this public explosion of a private wound, the story had to go back many years, to when the billionaire's little boy was still small enough to be carried on his father's shoulders. Back to when he didn't know what danger looked like, even when it smiled at him. Years earlier, the Cole mansion had been the kind of place people pointed at from their car windows. It rose over the quiet streets of Banana Island in Lagos like a glowing palace. Tall glass walls, shining white pillars, manicured lawns, and a fountain that danced at night, reflecting lights in blue and gold. Inside, there were more rooms than little Jordan could count, long corridors, high ceilings, staff always moving, cooks, drivers, cleaners, security. Anthony Cole, a Nigerian-American tech billionaire, had built his empire from scratch. Born in Atlanta to immigrant parents, he grew up hearing that Africa is the future. When his software company exploded in success, he brought his wealth back to Lagos, investing in tech hubs, schools, and hospitals. On TV, people called him a visionary, a blessing to the continent, a role model for young Africans. He loved those titles. He loved the applause, the interviews, the red carpets. But applause is loud. Sometimes it drowns out small cries. Amara, his wife, was a dark-skinned beauty with gentle eyes and a sharp mind. She had her own clothing brand, mixing African prints with modern designs. She worked with models in New York, stylists in London, tailors in Abuja, and influencers on Instagram. Her designs walked runways. Her face sat on magazine covers. Between Anthony's business meetings and Amara's fashion shows, their calendars were packed. Flights, dinners, awards, strategy sessions, board rooms. In the middle of all that was Jordan. A small boy with soft brown skin, big curious eyes, and a head full of tight curls that refused to stay brushed. He loved toy cars, picture books, cartoons, and building things out of blocks on the living room floor. "Daddy, see," he would shout, holding up a crooked tower of plastic bricks when Anthony passed by. "Nice one, champ," Anthony would say, dropping a quick kiss on his head. "We'll play later, okay? Daddy has a call." "Mommy, look, I draw you," Jordan would say, running to Amara with a crayon drawing of a stick woman in a bright dress. "Aw, that's beautiful, baby," she'd smile, hugging him briefly before her phone buzzed again. "Mommy will put it in her office. Go and play, okay?" They loved their son. No one could deny that. They paid the best school, hired the best pediatrician, bought the best toys, prayed for him at night when they remembered. But love without time can feel like distance to a child. As their companies grew, they decided they needed more help at home. Not just any help, someone who could care for Jordan like family. So one hot afternoon, when Jordan was about 5, the front gates opened to allow a young woman through. She was tall and slim, with smooth brown skin and a long neck. Her hair was braided into neat cornrows pulled back into a bun. She wore a simple cream blouse over a dark skirt and carried a small black bag. She walked in with her shoulders slightly bowed, eyes lowered in respect. "This is Maya," the head housekeeper introduced. "She comes from a good family, worked before in Abuja, very neat, very respectful. She loves children." Maya lifted her eyes and smiled, a bright, gentle smile that made the house staff relax. "Good afternoon, Ma. Good afternoon, sir," she said, her voice soft and musical. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity." Anthony nodded, barely looking up from his tablet. "You'll be taking care of our son mostly. His name is Jordan. He's 5. Just make sure he eats, sleeps, and doesn't watch too much TV." Amara, slipping on her heels, added, "And please, keep the house quiet when we're on calls. He can be a bit loud sometimes when he's excited." "Yes, Mom," Maya answered. "I understand." From behind the living room door, a small head peeped out. "Jordan." He watched the strange woman with shy curiosity, his thumb hovering near his mouth. He clutched his favorite toy car in one hand, a small red one that his father had brought from Atlanta. Maya noticed him. Her smile widened. "Is that him?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. Anthony finally looked away from his tablet and followed her gaze. "Ah, champ, come out," he called. Jordan hesitated, then slowly stepped into the room. His bare feet were quiet on the shiny tiles. He wore a blue t-shirt with cartoon lions on it and gray shorts. "This is Maya," Amara said, bending to straighten his shirt. "She's going to be helping Mommy and Daddy take care of you." Maya knelt so she was at his eye level. "Hello, Jordan," she said softly. "I'm Maya, I like your car." Jordan looked at her carefully, then looked at the car clutched in his small hand. "It goes fast," he whispered. "Really?" Maya smiled. "Maybe you can show me later, huh?" He nodded a little, eyes still unsure. Something about her smile made him feel both seen and stared at. But at 5 years old, feelings are like clouds. They pass without names. Anthony's phone buzzed again. He sighed. "We have to go. Remember, we're late for that investor lunch." "Oh my God, yes," Amara muttered, grabbing her purse. "Jordan, be a good boy, okay? We'll bring you something when we come back." They kissed the top of his head in a rush, a kiss that smelled like expensive perfume and cologne. And then they were gone, voices fading into the hallway as they talked about traffic and talking points. The front door clicked. The house grew strangely quiet. Jordan stood in the middle of the living room, his small shoulders straight, listening to the sound of the car starting, the gates opening and closing. He was alone with the new maid. Maya rose to her full height and looked around the large living room, taking in the expensive furniture, the huge TV, the framed family photos on the wall. Her eyes lingered on one picture, baby Jordan on Anthony's shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing, sunlight bouncing off the water. Her face changed for just a second. Something unreadable flickered in her eyes. Then she turned back to the boy, her smile back in place. "So," she said softly, stepping closer, "it's just you and me now, little man." Jordan's fingers tightened around his toy car. That evening, as the sun sank over the Lagos Lagoon and the house settled into its quiet night routine, Maya would walk down the hallway, open the door to Jordan's room, and close it gently behind her. And that was when a wound would begin to form in a small boy's mind. A wound his parents would not notice until it was almost too late. Years passed before anyone noticed that something in Jordan's eyes had changed. To outsiders, he looked like the perfect billionaire's son, always wearing neat clothes, always polite, always quiet. Too quiet. His teachers at the private academy in Victoria Island called him a calm child, well-behaved, mature for his age. They didn't know that children who learn silence early carry it everywhere. Inside the massive coal mansion, Maya blended into the household like a shadow. She never raised her voice. She never broke rules. She cooked small meals for Jordan, folded his clothes, combed his hair, and tucked him into bed when his parents traveled. She answered the door for couriers, cleaned the marble floors, and stood respectfully in corners when visitors came. To Anthony and Amara, she was a blessing. "Thank God for Maya," Amara would sigh while fastening her earrings before another award event. "Without her, I don't know how we would cope." Anthony nodded. "She's loyal and Jordan is fond of her." They never questioned it. Because when success comes loud, the quiet things often go unnoticed. Jordan was 7 when his behavior began to shift in ways his parents couldn't ignore. Small signs, strange ones. He started jumping when doors opened suddenly. He avoided eye contact with adults. He grew unusually protective of his personal space. Sometimes, when Maya entered the room, he froze, the kind of freeze a child shouldn't know. But Anthony and Amara were always rushing, from Lagos to London, Abuja to Atlanta. "Maybe he's just shy," Amara said once. "Or overwhelmed by schoolwork," Anthony added. But neither of them slowed down long enough to look deeper. Then one afternoon, everything changed. It was a humid Thursday, when the first real warning sign appeared. Jordan's teacher called. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Cole," she began, her tone gentle but worried. "Is everything okay at home?" Amara frowned, turning down the music in the car. "What do you mean?" "Well, today during art class, Jordan drew something very troubling. It made the other children uncomfortable. When I asked him about it, he refused to speak and started shaking." Amara's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Shaking?" "Yes, I'm concerned. He's been unusually withdrawn for months, very jumpy. And today, after the drawing, he cried quietly for almost an hour." Amara's heartbeat quickened. "Can you send me the drawing?" she asked. Minutes later, her phone vibrated. She opened the image. Her breath caught. It was a crude drawing but unmistakable. A child in a room, a tall figure standing nearby, something wrong in the posture, something disturbing in the silence of the picture. Her eyes burned. She turned the car around so fast the tires screeched. When she burst into the mansion, Jordan was sitting on the living room couch, knees to his chest, eyes dull. Maya hovered beside him, gentle as always. "What's wrong, Ma?" Maya asked, stepping forward. Amara didn't answer. She only knelt before her son. "Jordan," she whispered, "baby, what happened?" He didn't speak. He only reached for her hand, a gesture he hadn't made in years, and held it tight, like a drowning child grabbing something solid. "Maya," Amara said slowly, standing, "go to your room now." Maya blinked, fear, a flicker of it crossed her face. "Ma, did I?" "Go," Amara repeated. Maya walked away, but not before glancing back at Jordan. His small body flinched when her eyes passed over him. Amara saw it. And in that moment, her world tilted. Her phone rang again, this time Anthony. "Amara, my meeting in Abuja just ended. What happened? The school emailed me too." Amara swallowed hard. "Come home, Anthony, now." "What did the boy draw?" Her voice broke. "Just get home." When Anthony arrived hours later, he walked straight into Jordan's room. The boy was asleep already, curled into himself, his breaths uneven. Anthony took one look at his son, really looked, for the first time in years. There were things he suddenly noticed. Dark circles under Jordan's eyes. Constant tension in his shoulders. A strange way he kept the blanket pulled high around him, as though shielding himself. A guilt he'd never known before stabbed Anthony's chest. He walked downstairs. Amara stood in the dining room, clutching the drawing. Her face was red from crying. Anthony's voice was a whisper. "Where is Maya?" "In her room," Amara said. "I locked her inside. I'm scared of what I might do if I look at her." Anthony sat slowly. "We can't accuse her like this until we talk to Jordan, maybe." "Anthony." Amara's voice was trembling but firm. "Did you see your son? Did you see him?" Anthony closed his eyes. Shame washed over him. "We've been absent," she whispered. "Too busy, too trusting, too careless." He had no argument. "We need to get help," he said finally. "A child psychologist, someone who can talk to him." Amara nodded, tears falling. But something else was happening upstairs. In the quiet of her room, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, hands trembling. She knew. She knew the boy had drawn something. She knew the mother had seen something. She knew the silence she'd controlled for years was slowly slipping. She whispered to herself, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her chest tightened. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Jordan, unable to sleep, had woken up moments ago. He sat in his dark room, knees pulled close. He heard whispers downstairs. He heard his parents talking, really talking, for the first time about him. And quietly, without meaning to, he whispered the name he had feared for years. "Maya." Downstairs, Amara froze. Anthony looked up sharply. That one word from their son, spoken in a broken whisper, confirmed everything they had tried so hard not to imagine. Amara covered her mouth. Anthony stood slowly, his hands shaking. Because now there was no doubt. And the truth they had ignored for years had finally come to the surface, ready to burn everything. The mansion felt heavier the next morning, like its walls had absorbed the weight of what had finally been spoken. For years, the Cole household had been filled with laughter from guests, footsteps from staff, and the soft whir of air conditioners. But today, silence settled everywhere. A deep, uncomfortable silence. The sun filtered through the tall windows, casting golden stripes across the polished marble floors. Breakfast sat untouched on the table, steaming yam porridge, fried plantain, eggs, and freshly squeezed orange juice. Yet no one was eating. Jordan sat at the far end of the table, staring at his spoon. His shoulders were tense. His fingers trembled slightly each time he reached for his glass. He looked smaller than usual, shrinking into the oversized chair. Amara sat closest to him, eyes never leaving her son. She watched every flicker of discomfort, every forced swallow, every silent tremble. Her heart felt like it was splitting open. On the other end, Anthony leaned back in his chair, elbows resting on the table, eyes fixed on the doorway, the one leading to the hallway where Maya's room was. He hadn't slept. Neither had Amara. Every time he closed his eyes, the drawing flashed in his mind. Every time he tried to breathe, he saw his son curled tightly on the bed like he was trying to disappear. At exactly 8:05 a.m., the head of security, Mr. Ogendell, entered quietly. "Sir Ma, good morning." Anthony stood. "Where is she?" Ogendell cleared his throat. "Still in her room, sir, locked as instructed. One of the female guards stayed outside the door all night." Amara looked away, nausea curling in her stomach. "I need to talk to her," Anthony said. Amara grabbed his wrist. "Not alone." He nodded. "Not alone." Jordan's spoon clattered suddenly, startling both parents. His eyes widened with fear. I didn't do anything," he whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't break it, I didn't." "It's okay," Amara rushed to him, kneeling at his side. "Baby, it's okay. Nobody is angry." Jordan looked confused, as though the idea of being safe was something he had forgotten how to feel. Anthony's chest tightened painfully. "Jordan," he said gently, kneeling beside him too, though he wasn't used to kneeling for anyone. "Mommy and Daddy are here now. We're not going anywhere today. We're with you, all day." Jordan blinked rapidly. Tears filled his eyes, but he forced them back in, swallowing them the way children who have been hurt often do. Anthony felt something burn behind his own eyes. He stood, took a shaky breath, and looked at Ogendell. "Take me to her." Amara rose too. "She will not come near my son again," she said, voice shaking with restrained anger. Jordan flinched at the sound of anger, even though it wasn't directed at him. Amara softened immediately. "Daddy and I will be back soon, okay?" Jordan nodded, but grabbed her hand before she could leave. "Don't let her look at me," he whispered, voice trembling. "I do like when she looks at me." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "She will never look at you again, I promise." Jordan nodded, still trembling. When his parents walked away, he pulled his knees to his chest again. The house felt too big, too open, too unsafe. But for the first time, he wasn't alone in his fear. In the hallway, Anthony and Amara walked side by side, hearts pounding. When they reached Maya's door, they found her sitting on her bed, fully dressed, hands in her lap. She looked frightened, not of them, but of something inside herself. She stood quickly when they entered. "Sir Ma, I don't understand why." "Maya," Anthony cut in, voice controlled but ice cold. "Jordan said your name." Her lips parted slightly. Something flickered in her eyes again, guilt, panic, shame. I would never," she whispered, voice thin. Amara stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Don't lie, not today, not after what we've seen." Maya's breath hitched. He was lonely, she said suddenly. You were never around, he needed comfort, attention. He trusted me. Anthony felt his body go rigid. And you took advantage of that trust. I didn't mean. Stop. Amara's voice cracked like a whip. Do you know what you did to my son? Do you know the nightmares he wakes up with, the fear in his eyes? Do you know how long he carried the weight alone? Maya's face crumpled. She looked down, hands shaking violently. I was young, confused, angry at my life. I didn't understand how much I was hurting him. You didn't understand. Anthony's voice rose sharply, anger he had buried for years suddenly boiling up. You were the adult. He was a child. Silence. Amara whispered, you broke something inside him. Maya covered her face with trembling hands. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry. Anthony exchanged a look with Amara. This is no longer a private issue, he said. Pack your things. You're leaving today. Security will escort you out. After that, we will decide what actions to take. Maya nodded slowly, tears falling into her hands. And don't ever come near my son again, Amara added, voice cold as stone. Maya didn't look up. When Anthony and Amara returned to the living room, Jordan was curled up on the couch, half asleep, hugging a pillow tightly. He jolted awake when he heard footsteps. Is she gone? He whispered. Soon, Anthony said gently. She will not be here anymore. Jordan's lip quivered. But what if she comes back? She won't, Amara whispered, pulling him into her arms. Mommy and Daddy are here now. We should have been here more. We should have protected you. Jordan's small fingers dug into his mother's sleeve. Anthony sat on the other side and placed a hand on his son's back, gently, carefully. We're going to fix this, he said softly. Not by pretending it didn't happen, but by being here, really being here. Jordan's breathing slowed a little. Will I get better? He asked quietly. The question stabbed both parents straight through the heart. Yes, Amara said. With help, with love, with time, you will. Jordan nodded, exhausted. For the first time since he was 5, he fell asleep between both parents, his head on his mother's lap, his small hand clutching his father's fingers. Anthony looked at Amara. Amara looked at Anthony. Both realized something painful and undeniable. They couldn't undo the past, but they could fight for the boy they almost lost. And this was only the beginning of the healing. And the reckoning. The first appointment with the child psychologist was scheduled for the following week, but the emotional storm inside the Cole mansion had already begun long before then. Jordan's world shifted overnight. His parents, once distant figures who existed between airport terminals and business meetings, were suddenly everywhere. They stayed home. They canceled flights. They worked from the dining room or not at all. They hovered near him, carefully, not smothering him, but close enough that he always knew they were there. Jordan didn't know how to process it. He moved through the house like someone learning how to walk again. Slowly, cautiously, observing, testing, adjusting. And his parents, watching him struggle with trust and fear, wished desperately that they could turn the clock back and erase the years they spent choosing success over presence. The first few days were the hardest. Jordan kept asking the same questions. Where is she now? Will she come back? What if she hides in the house? What if I see her again? Every time, Anthony or Amara would reassure him. But his fear wasn't logical. It wasn't something that could be reasoned away. It had lived inside him for years, shaping him quietly. Now that the wound was exposed, it bled openly. At night, he woke up screaming, not loud screams, but sharp gasps, like someone drowning and breaking the surface just long enough to breathe. The nightmares were so intense that he often woke shaking, tears slipping down his cheeks before he was fully conscious. Amara always rushed to his room. She slept in a chair beside his bed some nights, holding his hand until dawn. Anthony struggled with that. Not because he didn't want to help, but because guilt made his hands shake whenever he touched his son. For years, he prided himself on providing and protecting. Now he saw he had been blind, and his son had paid the price. One particular night changed everything. Jordan woke with a pounding heartbeat, chest rising and falling fast, sweat soaking the collar of his pajamas. Amara held him tight, whispering, "You're safe, baby, mommy is here." Anthony stood at the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. For a moment he watched, unsure if his presence would help or make things worse. Then Jordan looked up, eyes puffy, breath shaky, and whispered something so small Anthony almost didn't hear it. "Daddy, can you stay too?" Anthony froze. Those words hit him harder than any business failure, any market crash, any public scandal ever could. For the first time in his life, he felt his throat close up. "I'm here," he said softly, walking to the bed. "I'm not leaving." Jordan let go of Amara's sleeve and reached for his father's hand. Anthony held it gently, as though it were something fragile he'd taken far too long to appreciate. The three of them sat there until Jordan drifted back to sleep. For hours after, Anthony remained by the bed, staring at his son's face, seeing every trace of the little boy he had missed while chasing the world. He whispered into the silence, "I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry." Amara heard him but didn't speak. She simply rested her head on his shoulder, a comfort they hadn't shared in a long time. The next morning, Jordan woke brighter than he had in weeks. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. Breakfast was different now. Instead of the stiff, formal meals the house staff prepared, Amara cooked something herself, something she hadn't done since before Jordan was born. When Jordan came downstairs, he blinked in surprise. Amara stood at the stove, wearing a loose t-shirt and hair tied up. Anthony sat beside the counter, peeling oranges poorly, so poorly that Jordan giggled for the first time in a long time. Anthony looked up. "What? You don't know how to peel," Jordan said between small laughs. Anthony smiled faintly. "I'm learning, you can teach me sometime." Jordan nodded shyly. They ate pancakes together, Amara's imperfect, oddly shaped pancakes. They tasted better to Jordan than any gourmet breakfast he'd ever had. Normalcy, real normalcy, began to creep in. But healing was not a straight line. That afternoon, something triggered Jordan again. He was watching a cartoon when a tall female character entered the scene. The way she walked, confident, graceful, too familiar, froze him instantly. His breathing quickened. His hands shook. His shoulders curled inward. Amara noticed first, Jordan. He hugged his knees, hiding his face. Anthony rushed forward instantly. "What happened?" Jordan didn't speak. He only pointed silently at the TV. Amara turned it off, and the house grew quiet again. Anthony knelt in front of him. "You don't have to explain. It's okay, champ." But Jordan wanted to. He needed to. "She looked like her," he whispered. Anthony swallowed hard. "We're here. We won't let anything hurt you again." Jordan nodded slowly, calming down after several minutes. That moment confirmed something for both parents. Healing wasn't just about removing Maya from their home. It was about rebuilding their son from the inside out, piece by fragile piece. And that required more than love. It required understanding. So later that evening, Anthony sat in the study, scrolling through articles, searching for everything he needed to know about child trauma, mental health, and recovery. He read until his eyes burned. Amara watched him from the doorway, surprised. "You're taking this seriously," she said softly. He looked up, face tired but determined. "I wasn't there for him when he needed me most. Now I'm going to be there for every step." Amara nodded slowly. She had blamed him initially, resented his long hours, his constant travel. But the truth was, she had been just as absent. Her fashion empire had taken as much of her time as his business did. "We both failed him," she whispered. Anthony closed the laptop and stood. "Then we'll fix it together." It was the first time they had spoken like a team in years. That weekend, the house staff noticed a dramatic change. Anthony was the one taking Jordan outside to play football. Amara helped him with his drawing projects, praising every little effort. The TV stayed off most days. Jordan's room was filled with new activities, puzzles, books, games. Not expensive ones. Not flashy ones. Just things that kept him connected. For the first time, the family was becoming exactly that, a family. But even as they rebuilt peace inside their home, something outside was brewing. The head of security approached Anthony one morning with a troubled expression. "Sir, there is something you need to see." Anthony frowned. "What is it?" Ogundel handed him a tablet. A news headline flashed across the screen. "Former Maid A.T. Cole Mansion seen LEAVING in tears. NEIGHBORS report a big problem inside Billionaire's home." Another headline followed. "What happened in the Cole Mansion? Sources say it, serious." Anthony's stomach twisted. He scrolled further. And then his heart dropped. There was a photo of Jordan, standing by the window. Face sad. Eyes empty. It had been taken years ago, without permission. Someone had sent it to the press. And the story was spreading. Vast. Anthony's hands clenched. "Who leaked this?" Ogundel's voice was quiet. "Sir, we believe it was Maya." Before Anthony could respond, Amara rushed into the room holding her phone. "Anthony, Jordan just saw something online. He's shaking again. We need to get ahead of this. Now." Anthony froze. Because the storm inside their home had barely settled. And the world was already knocking at their door. Forcing its way in. Dragging their family's deepest wound into the public eye. The battle was no longer private. It was just beginning. The Cole Mansion had faced business storms, political pressure, and media gossip before, but nothing like this. Not when the story involved their son. Not when the headlines carried shadows they had tried so hard to keep away from him. By morning, the house was surrounded. News vans lined the quiet Banana Island street. Cameras flashed at every movement behind the gates. Drones hovered illegally above the property, catching glimpses of the balcony and garden. Reporters shouted questions at security guards who remained stone-faced. Anthony watched everything from his office window, fists tight at his sides. "How did it spread so fast?" he muttered. Amara stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself. "Because people love scandal, especially when it involves rich families." "We weren't even ready to tell the story," Anthony whispered. "Jordan wasn't ready." She nodded slowly. "It's no longer about readiness," she said. "It's about protection." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Jordan stood there. His eyes were red again. "Mom, Dad, why are people taking pictures of our house?" Anthony exchanged a look with Amara, one filled with helpless despair. He walked toward Jordan and knelt. "There are people outside who want to write stories about us," Anthony said carefully. "Stories that aren't true, stories they don't understand." Jordan swallowed hard. "Is it because of me?" Amara knelt beside them. "No, it's because of them. They want to make something loud out of something private, but we're not going to let them hurt you." Jordan hesitated. "Are they angry with me?" "No," Anthony said firmly. "No one is angry with you. You did nothing wrong." Jordan nodded slowly, but the fear lingered. His voice was small. "I heard someone online say that rich kids are always lying." Anthony froze. Amara's heart cracked in pieces. "Oh, baby," she whispered, pulling him close. "People online talk without thinking. They don't know your story, they don't know your pain, and they don't deserve the truth." Jordan hugged her tightly. "I don't want people looking at me." "You don't have to go outside," she soothed. "You don't have to answer anything. We'll handle this." Anthony looked at his son, truly looked, and realized something painful. The world had taken so much of Jordan's innocence already. They couldn't let it take more. "We're calling the police," Anthony said, "for protection and for Maya." Amara nodded. She crossed a line. She must be held accountable. Jordan stiffened at the name. "Is she coming back?" he whispered. "No," Anthony said, brushing his son's curls gently, "and she never will." Later that afternoon, the police arrived through the back gate to avoid reporters. They took statements, asked careful questions, gathered the drawing, interviewed the head of security. Jordan didn't have to speak to them. His psychologist advised waiting until the boy felt safe enough. After the officers left, the mansion grew quiet again, but the pressure outside tightened. Bloggers kept posting. Rumors multiplied. Maya's face, her old staff ID photo, was now everywhere online. And strangers, hiding behind anonymous profiles, flung careless opinions. Another rich kid lying for attention. That Maid didn't look capable of anything like that. These rich families love to ruin people's lives. Anthony slammed his phone on the counter. "They're attacking the victim." Amara shook her head. "It's the internet, they don't care about facts." Jordan, sitting with a coloring book on the couch, flinched whenever a phone vibrated. He whispered, "Is it about me again?" Amara immediately put her phone down and sat beside him. "Not everything in this world deserves our attention. Right now, all you need to focus on is healing." Jordan nodded, though he didn't fully understand. Days passed. The psychologist came twice a week, a kind woman with soft eyes and a gentle voice. She didn't ask Jordan direct questions. She didn't push him to talk. Instead, she let him play with toys, draw, or sit quietly while she observed. One day, during a session, she asked if he wanted to show her his favorite place in the house. He led her to the backyard garden, the quietest part of the mansion. Anthony watched from a distance, nervous, but the psychologist smiled reassuringly. Jordan walked among the flowers, touching petals lightly, breathing the warm Lagos air. The psychologist sat on a stone bench under the shade of a large tree. "Do you like being here?" she asked. Jordan nodded. "It feels safe." "Why does it feel safe?" He paused. "Because she never came out here." The psychologist wrote something down, but gently, carefully. "You're brave," she said. Jordan looked confused. "Why?" "Because you carried something heavy for a long time," she said. "And even though it hurt, you survived. That's brave." Jordan stared at the flowers. After a long silence, he whispered, "I didn't tell Daddy because I thought he'd say he was too busy." Anthony, still listening from afar, felt something inside him break. Later that night, he cried quietly in the study, the first time in years. Not because of guilt alone, not because of fear, but because he finally understood the cost of his absence. And he vowed it would never happen again. 2 weeks later, the police returned with an update. "Sir Ma, we located Maya." Amara inhaled sharply. "Where is she?" "In her village, outside Abuja." She initially tried to deny everything, but after questioning, she broke down. She admitted she harmed the boy. She also admitted leaking photos to the media. Anthony rubbed his forehead. "What happens next?" "That's up to you," the officer said. "But we recommend pressing charges. This is not something that should be left unresolved." Amara looked at Jordan, who was sitting on the sofa building a small tower with blocks. She whispered, "We will do what protects our son and stops her from hurting any other child." Anthony agreed. But the real turning point came later that evening. The TV was off. The phones were silent, and dinner had become a new family ritual, one filled with small victories and gentle conversations. As they prepared for bed, Jordan suddenly tugged Anthony's sleeve. "Daddy, can I tell you something?" Anthony knelt instantly. "Anything." Jordan hesitated, fingers twisting together nervously. "I had a dream yesterday," he whispered. "In the dream, you and Mommy were walking in front of me and I was scared. But then, you both turned around and held my hands." Anthony's breath caught. "And," he whispered. Jordan smiled, a small, fragile smile. "And then I wasn't scared anymore." Anthony pulled him into a hug, eyes burning. "We're here now," he whispered. "We're holding your hands for real, and we won't let go again." Jordan hugged him tighter. The healing wasn't complete. The scars weren't gone. But for the first time in years, hope had entered the house. Real hope. And neither Anthony nor Amara planned to ever let it fade again. Also, comment where you are watching from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share to support more powerful stories like this. The news cycle eventually shifted, as it always does. Another scandal rose. Another story swallowed the public's attention. The cameras outside the mansion thinned. The drones stopped hovering. Bloggers moved on to the next trending drama. But inside the Cole household, healing was still a daily journey. Jordan's progress came slowly, like dawn breaking through fog. Some days were bright and hopeful. Others were heavy and confusing. Trauma never disappeared in a straight, clean line. It curved, dipped, stalled, then moved again. But Jordan was no longer walking alone. His parents had become his anchors. And their home, once a place where silence hid wounds, had transformed. On a sunny Saturday morning, Jordan sat at the kitchen island with a glass of warm cocoa. His legs dangled from the stool as he hummed a small tune from a cartoon intro. Amara watched him fondly while flipping pancakes, the sweet smell filling the kitchen. Anthony walked in wearing sweatpants and a simple t-shirt, a far cry from his usual expensive suits. "Who wants to help me plant the new flowers I bought?" Jordan's hand shot up immediately. "Me." Anthony grinned. "Get your sandals, champ, the backyard is waiting." As Jordan ran upstairs, Amara leaned against the counter, studying her husband. "You're doing well," she said gently. Anthony shrugged, though his expression softened. "I'm trying." "No," she insisted. "You're present. That's something we haven't been in a long time." He exhaled slowly. "I should have seen the signs." "We both should have," she replied, placing a hand on his arm. "But we can't change the past. What we can do is show him every day that he matters to us." Anthony nodded, grateful for the unity they were rediscovering. For the first time in years, their marriage felt like a partnership again, not two separate people chasing success, but a team fighting for their child. A week later, Jordan had another therapy session. This time the psychologist asked him, "Do you feel safer now than before?" Jordan thought for a moment and nodded. "Because Mommy and Daddy stay home more, and they talk to me." "What do they talk about?" the psychologist asked. Jordan shrugged. "Everything: breakfast, cartoons, flowers, even sad stuff." "Do you like talking to them?" Jordan looked down shyly. "Yes." The psychologist smiled. "You're doing very well." But later that night, Jordan had a setback. A loud thunderstorm rolled across Lagos. Bright lightning flashed through the windows, followed by heavy, booming thunder. The sound shook the house. Jordan shot up in bed, heart pounding. His breathing quickened. His hands trembled violently. He curled into himself, eyes wide. The storm reminded him of all the nights Maya had entered his room without warning, when the vulnerability of darkness made him feel trapped. He covered his ears, but the thunder only grew louder. Tears fell uncontrollably. Within seconds, Anthony and Amara rushed into his room. "Jordan," Amara called softly, running to him. He shook his head repeatedly. "I'm scared, I'm scared." Anthony sat on one side of the bed, wrapping an arm around him. "It's just the storm, champ. We're here. Nothing can hurt you." "You're safe," Amara whispered, stroking his hair. "Mommy and Daddy are right here." Lightning illuminated the room again. Jordan flinched hard, but this time, instead of disappearing into fear, he grabbed both his parents' hands, squeezing tightly. Amara kissed his forehead. Anthony held his back. And they stayed with him until the storm passed. The next morning, Jordan walked downstairs a little taller. He sat at the dining table and said softly, "I didn't run away. I stayed with you." Anthony, pouring orange juice, gave him a proud smile. "You were so brave." Jordan beamed. For a child recovering from trauma, bravery wasn't big, heroic gestures. It was staying in the room when fear wanted him to flee. It was trusting the hands that held him. It was believing he was safe, even when the world outside said otherwise. But healing wasn't only happening inside Jordan. It was happening inside his parents too. One evening after Jordan went to bed, Anthony and Amara sat in the living room. No phones, no laptops, just quiet, something they hadn't shared in a long time. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing him emotionally?" Amara asked. Anthony nodded slowly. "Every day." "We were chasing so much," she whispered. "Money, recognition, success, and we didn't see what was happening right under our roof." He swallowed painfully. "I used to think providing financially was enough. I didn't understand that presence is the real protection." Amara leaned into him. "We were raised differently. Our parents equated love with survival. They worked hard so we could have better lives. That's all we knew." Anthony sighed. "But we forgot that children need eyes, not just money." She nodded. "We won't forget again." He took her hand gently. "We'll keep choosing him every day." Their fingers intertwined, a simple gesture, but one that felt like an overdue promise. 2 weeks after the storm, Jordan had a surprising breakthrough. He asked if he could return to school. Anthony and Amara exchanged hopeful glances. "Are you sure?" Amara asked gently. Jordan nodded. "I miss my classmates and I want to try." It was a big step, one that required courage Jordan didn't realize he had. On his first day back, he clutched his backpack tightly. When they approached the school gates, he paused and looked up at his parents. "You'll come back for me, right?" "Right when school closes," Anthony promised. "And if I feel scared, can I call?" Jordan asked quietly. Amara knelt. "Anytime, no matter what, we're here." Jordan nodded, took a deep breath and walked in. His parents watched until the doors closed. Anthony whispered, "He's stronger than I ever was." Amara smiled softly. "He learned strength from surviving, but now he's learning healing from us." Later that week, the psychologist had a private meeting with Anthony and Amara. She cleared her throat gently. "Jordan is doing better than most children in his situation because you stepped in, because you changed everything about how you parent him." She leaned forward. "But he still needs consistent presence, consistent support, and consistent love." Anthony nodded firmly. "He'll get all of that every day." The psychologist smiled. "Then your son will not just heal, he will thrive." For the first time, Anthony and Amara felt hope settle inside them, deep, steady, and real. Their son wasn't broken. He was rebuilding. And they were rebuilding with him. But even as the family moved toward peace, a letter would arrive the next day. A letter from someone they didn't expect. A letter that would reopen parts of the story still unfinished, and force the Coles to confront what closure really meant. The letter arrived on a quiet Monday morning. The kind of morning that felt peaceful enough to believe the worst was finally behind them. Jordan had just finished breakfast and was drawing in the living room. Anthony was reviewing emails. Amara was folding laundry, humming softly. For once, the mansion felt like a normal home. Then the gate buzzer rang. The head of security walked in holding a brown envelope addressed to the Cole family. His face held an uncertainty that made Anthony straighten up immediately. "Who delivered it?" Anthony asked. "A motorcycle courier," Ogendale replied. "He said it was urgent." Amara wiped her hands, nerves tightening in her chest. Jordan looked up from his drawing, sensing the shift. Anthony carefully opened the envelope. There were only two items inside: a handwritten letter and an old, worn photograph. Anthony unfolded the letter. It was from Maya. Amara stepped closer. Jordan's grip tightened around his pencil. Anthony began to read silently, then aloud but gently, so as not to frighten Jordan. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Cole, they told me I could write one letter before the court date. I don't know if you'll read this or destroy it. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I am not asking for it. I am writing because the truth did not start in your house. It started in mine. I was hurt as a child, for years, by someone who should have protected me. I never healed from it. I carried that wound everywhere I went. That is not an excuse. Nothing excuses what I did. I crossed a boundary that never should have been crossed, and I shattered a child's safety the same way mine was shattered. Jordan did not deserve that. He is innocent. I know I have ruined years of his life, and the guilt eats me every day. I wanted to tell you that I am ready for whatever punishment comes. I will not fight it. I will not deny anything again. But I hope, truly hope, that your son grows into a man who feels loved, protected, and whole. I hope he gets the healing I never got. I am sorry, not because I was caught, but because I hurt a child who trusted me. Maya." When Anthony finished reading, the room felt unbearably still. Amara pressed her hand to her chest, processing the pain, the anger, the tragedy behind the words. Jordan quietly stood up and walked toward them. "Is she coming back?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "No," Anthony said softly. "She won't ever come back." Jordan nodded, but there was something else in his eyes, a confusion children feel when they're confronted with adult pain they don't fully understand. Amara knelt and opened her arms. Jordan stepped into her embrace. "It wasn't your fault," she whispered. "It was never your fault." Jordan nodded against her shoulder. Anthony folded the letter and put it back into the envelope. He didn't feel forgiveness. He didn't feel understanding. But he felt clarity. The past could not be rewritten, but the future could be rebuilt. That evening, Anthony and Amara sat on the balcony while Jordan played with building blocks inside. The sunset painted the Lago sky in soft shades of orange and purple. "Do we tell him everything?" Amara asked softly. "Not now," Anthony replied. "Not until he's older, not until it won't break him." She nodded. "What about court?" she pressed. Anthony looked down at his hands. "We'll go, we'll testify, she will face the consequences." Amara sighed. "Some part of me feels sorry that she was hurt too." Anthony nodded. Hurt people, but that doesn't erase what she did." "No," her voice hardened. "It doesn't." They sat quietly for a moment. Then Amara reached for Anthony's hand. "You know," she whispered, "this whole thing, it opened my eyes." Anthony turned toward her. "We spent so many years chasing the world that we forgot the world we created inside this house. A mansion means nothing if a child feels alone in it." He nodded slowly. "We lost time we can never get back." She took a shaky breath, "But we didn't lose him." Anthony followed her gaze. Jordan was sitting cross-legged on the rug, arranging blocks into a crooked tower. He looked up at them and smiled, a small, genuine smile. For the first time in a long time, it reached his eyes. Anthony felt warmth spread through him. "We didn't lose him," he repeated, "and we won't again." As the days passed, the Cole household continued to change. Anthony reduced his travel schedule permanently. He started declining events that didn't matter. He walked Jordan to the garden every morning before school. He spent evenings helping him with homework, something he had never done before. Amara also adjusted her business. She hired a manager to take over some of her workload, choosing to stay home more. She began cooking again, laughing again, talking again. And Jordan, he began to bloom. The nightmares became less frequent. His confidence grew slowly. He talked more in therapy. He played more freely. He hugged his parents without hesitation. One afternoon, he came home from school holding a certificate. "Look," he said excitedly, "I got most improved student." Anthony lifted him off the ground in a warm, tight hug. "I'm proud of you, champ." Jordan giggled. "Can we put it on the fridge?" Amara grinned. "We'll put it everywhere in this house." Jordan smiled, a brightness they hadn't seen since he was a toddler. Healing wasn't finished, but it was happening. Beautifully, quietly, steadily. A year later, on his 8th birthday, Jordan stood between his parents in front of a small cake. No big party, no dozens of guests, just family, warmth, and safety. Anthony placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Make a wish." Jordan closed his eyes. He didn't wish for toys. He didn't wish for trips. He didn't wish for anything money could buy. He whispered, "I wish we stay like this forever." Anthony and Amara exchanged a look filled with emotion. Because they knew the truth. Jordan's wish wasn't about magic. It was about presence, protection, attention, love, and those were things they could give him. Not just today, not just this year, but every day moving forward. The candles flickered gently. Jordan opened his eyes and smiled. And his parents smiled back, truly, fully, deeply, knowing the darkest chapter of their family's life had transformed into a lesson that would guide them forever. A lesson about listening. A lesson about vigilance. A lesson about love. A lesson about never abandoning a child emotionally, even when you're right there physically. The past had scarred them. But the future was theirs to rebuild. Together,